because of opposition from a few countries, is what I would call the missing MDG of energy. You cannot possibly bring about an improvement in living conditions and certainly cannot eliminate poverty if we don't address this absolutely essential need for ensuring that the very basic requirements of lighting, cooking, and where necessary heating are met in an effective way. Now, here I want to tell you, I mentioned earlier that there are 400 million people who have no access to electricity in this country. My institute has launched a program called Lighting a Billion Lives. And this essentially requires the distribution of solar lanterns, where we have, through design improvements, brought down the cost from something that was close to 4,000 rupees per solar lantern to less than 1,000 rupees. And this includes the allocated cost of the solar panel. And how the system works is that you train one person in a village, generally a woman, and we have done a lot of this in the Sundarbans in particular, because you just can't get electricity to some of those islands that are scattered all over the Bay of Bengal. And you train a woman in a village. She charges, let's say, 50 lanterns for that village during the daytime, using a solar panel on the roof. And in the evening, she rents them out to people and gets them back in the morning. Now, the solar lanterns today are really cost effective, because with design improvements, with the use of proper materials and the use of LED lighting systems, you eliminate the problem of stretching electric wires and providing electricity to people in rural areas, if they ever get it, at hours when they can't use it. I mean, most of the time, the reliability of power supply in rural areas is so awful that nobody can really benefit from even access to electricity theoretically. And this is something that we are launching as a major program. Now, we heard very interesting and insightful figures earlier from Yachuriji. I want to tell you, just to give you a comparison, BP was essentially held liable for this oil spill which took place in the Gulf of Mexico in that well called Deepwater Horizon. And the estimate is that they'll have to probably shell out something like $20 billion to provide compensation for those who have been affected. And of course, a good part of that will go into the pockets of lawyers. And I'm not talking of Indian lawyers. We have very distinguished Indian lawyers here. But certainly American lawyers can teach several people all over the world a lesson or two on how to make money on anything. Anyway, if you look at those $20 billion, I mean, all it would take, if we were to supply solar lanterns to 1 billion people across the world, all it would take is something like $5 billion. Now, we are really living in strange times where, you know, the very basic things that require modest resources are never really reaching those whose lives can be benefited. And, you know, that's true of education, that's true of several other areas of human endeavor. When I was doing my doctoral work, I concentrated to a large extent on human capital, and there's an enormous amount of literature that's been growing in the area of human capital. And I remember one particular PhD thesis, which was written by somebody in the Delhi School of Economics by the name of Nala Goundan, and this was way back. He had written it in '65. And he compared rates of return from alternatives by which, let's say, you invest in physical capital, human capital at the primary level, human capital at the university level, and so on. And it's no surprise that he found that the highest rates of returns came from investments in primary capital, primary education, far more than physical capital that is used, let's say, for manufacturing or a range of other activities. So the point I'm trying to make is that if we really want to create environmental sustainability, then I think we have to bring about major institutional reform. We have to ensure that resources reach those targeted areas where we really want to enhance our environmental resources. And today, I think that's really the challenge. You have to enhance forest cover, forest intensity. You have to enhance the availability of clean air. You have to enhance clean water. You have to enhance the quality of soil. And most of our programs, by and large, have been ineffective in bringing that about. I mentioned the figure of over 10% of the GDP being lost on account of environmental damage and degradation. If you look at the loss of agriculture, we estimated that anywhere from 11 to 26% of agricultural output was being lost because of land degradation. Now, I'm not saying all of this is taking place on account of human factors or human influences. I mean, a lot of it also takes place on account of natural causes. But it's something that clearly requires concentration because it affects the livelihoods and lives of the poorest of the poor. And we have to emphasize the fact that ecosystem services, unless they are restored to a level and a quality that everybody has a right to expect, we are not likely to improve the livelihoods of the poorest of the poor. And if we're not going to bring about an improvement in the quality of these ecosystem services and ensure environmental sustainability, then the Millennium Development Goals really become meaningless because we are not going to be able to get rid of poverty in the foreseeable future. So I would only say this at this point of time. The last point I would like to make is on, and this would take a great deal of time if I was to elaborate on it, but the impacts of climate change, as we have clearly brought out in the fourth assessment report of the IPCC, are going to result in increased frequency and intensity of floods, droughts, heat waves, extreme precipitation events, and a whole range of impacts which are largely negative in the case of agriculture. And there is a substantial amount of research being done in this country already, whereby we find that there is growing evidence of negative impacts on agriculture as a result of climate change. And the one sector of agricultural activity where I think this is going to be critical is in the case of rain-fed agriculture. I think it's sad that throughout the past few decades, when we've had major research and development activities in the agricultural field, we have not really focused on the needs of the poorest agricultural workers, the poorest agriculturalists, because they are dependent entirely on rain-fed agriculture. And I want to mention one thing. In January 2008, I met the Honorable Chief Minister of West Bengal, Buddhadev Bhattacharya ji, and I told him that West Bengal is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Please let us work with you and carry out an assessment of future impacts, because on the one hand you have mountain areas like the Darjeeling Hills, on the other you are vulnerable to sea level rise, you have the entire Sundarbans and the long coastline, and there's a large section of people who are dependent on rain-fed agriculture, and you need to find out what's going to happen in the future so that you can start taking steps by which you can adapt to those impacts of climate change. And I must say to his credit, it took him 2 minutes. He says, please do it, the sooner the better. And we are working with the government of West Bengal in looking. It's unfortunate that the poorest of the poor are the worst victims of the lack of environmental sustainability. And I think unless we address this issue seriously, clearly the problem of poverty will remain unaddressed. Thank you very much.